The oldest stories we have don't start with a glorious burst of light. They start with a labor strike. According to the ancient Atrahasis myth, before humans existed, the lesser gods, the Igigi, were forced to dig the cosmic rivers. Exhausted from the heavy labor, they threw down their tools and rebelled. To solve this divine workforce crisis, the god Enki came up with a practical solution. He took wet, heavy clay from the riverbank and molded an entirely new species to serve as a substitute workforce. Sumerian theology defined humanity as a class of divine laborers, built explicitly to take over the grueling chores the gods refused to do themselves. This fatalistic, sweat-drenched origin story reflected life in southern Mesopotamia, where daily survival required massive, organized toil. Around 6500 BC, the geography of southern Mesopotamia presented a daunting landscape, a flat, fertile floodplain situated between the volatile Tigris and Euphrates rivers. The soil was nutrient-rich, but the region lacked every other fundamental building resources. There was no workable stone, no metal ores, and no timber for construction. To build homes and tools, these early settlers relied entirely on the only materials they had in abundance: river reeds and mud. And the rivers providing that mud were violently unpredictable. Destructive floods often threatened to wipe out mud brick settlements with little warning. This hostile environment presented a harsh binary choice: invent systems of total order or be destroyed by the river's chaos. Their first major physical engineering feat was taming the water. They dug extensive networks of irrigation canals by hand to redirect floodwaters into dry farmland. To maximize their harvests, they developed the agricultural plow and adapted the wheel to create wagons, radically scaling up their food production and transport. Managing this expanding agricultural system eventually created an information crisis, requiring an entirely new way of organizing data. This chart shows their solution, a base 60 mathematical system. Originally used to tally crops, its logic persists in our modern measurement of time and geometry. Early written language was strictly an accounting tool. This tablet shows how early cuneiform acted as an ancient spreadsheet to track grain, sheep, and labor rations. These pictograms rapidly evolved into abstract, wedge-shaped marks that could record increasingly complex administrative data. The intellectual pillars of modern life, mathematics, writing, and engineering, were born from the desperate necessity of managing a biological survival engine. The resulting agricultural surplus led to a massive population boom and the rise of unprecedented urban centers like Uruk. These cities centered around monumental temple complexes, like the Great Ziggurat of Ur seen here. This architecture reinforced the idea that the city's patron god was the ultimate landlord. Society shifted toward proto-industrialization, featuring enormous workshops where thousands of laborers churned out mass-produced pottery and textiles. To sustain this engine, a strict social hierarchy emerged. The bottom row of the Standard of Ur shows the labor class carrying heavy burdens. This contrasts with the top row, revealing the ruling elite enjoying a luxurious banquet while served by those below. While the city provided safety, it also transformed human society into a rigid machine of managers and toilers. The insatiable need for fertile land, fresh water, and vital trade routes inevitably caused neighboring city-states to clash. These border disputes escalated into organized state-level warfare. The stele of the vultures shows this transition, depicting highly disciplined soldiers moving as a single professional phalanx. Around the 24th century BC, Sargon of Akkad capitalized on this internal warfare. He conquered the fractured Sumerian cities and forged the first true empire. Sargon centralized his administration and physically tore down the defensive walls of conquered cities to prevent future rebellion. The relentless demand for resources required to sustain an urban population eventually turned the system outward, transforming agricultural organization into the machinery of war. A sudden and severe climatic shift, known as the 4.2 kiloyear event, eventually crippled the region, bringing a prolonged drought across the Middle East. The drought accelerated a creeping, self-inflicted environmental disaster, soil salinization. Centuries of intensive irrigation had left behind a toxic layer of white salt in the topsoil. This salt buildup poisoned the fields, making it increasingly impossible to grow their staple wheat crops. This dual shock of climate-driven drought and soil poisoning caused widespread famine, crippled the economy, and invited violent incursions from nomadic tribes. The Sumerians fell victim to a tragic paradox. The engineering that allowed them to conquer their environment eventually triggered an ecological collapse they could not survive. The unified state finally fractured. Starving cities declared independence, and Elamite invaders sacked the capital of Ur around 2004 BC. These metropolises were gradually abandoned. Their monumental mud brick ziggurats crumbled and were swallowed by shifting desert sands, leaving only the arid mounds seen here. While their cities vanished, their intellectual legacy endured on fragmented tablets like this one. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, they wrestled with the realization that humans cannot achieve immortality. Their vision of the afterlife, the House of Dust, was a place where the dead are forced to eat clay, completing the cycle of their muddy creation myth. The Sumerians returned to the dust from which they built their empire, but their magnificent, desperate labor defined the human condition, giving us the wheel and the hour and the written word to carry the burden forward.